Welcome back, AP. Or excuse me. Hi, Soph. Soph Kasana. It's nice to see you again. So, anyway, we were talking about in class today about Louis XIV being the Sun King and being like the premier French absolutist and version of absolutism in Europe, right? So, big things about him. First of all, let's go ahead and get started. His phrase, like, I am the state, like, perfectly describes his ruling style, right? Divine right was a big thing he believed in. He believed that God genuinely bestowed the ability for him to rule upon his shoulders, right? So his big major initiatives to kind of show you his ability to be very prosperous and a divine ruler. He ruled from his home, first of all, which he called his royal court, right? Which kind of replaced the estate. Write this down, all right? This is important. Right? Estates General, somewhere nearby. Estates hyphen general, General, right? The Estates General is considered to be like the French version of the Parliament, right? It's a legislative body, but he basically moved it over and just filled it full of nobles, and he called it his royal court. Like, let me put it to you this way. He appointed the ministers himself, which he actually picked upper, middle, and a lot of recently new noble families, and he did that because he wanted to... His phrase was, I wanted people to believe that I was letting them help me rule, even though I had no intention of ever listening to them. So he actually let a lot of them, like certain nobles had to live at Versailles with him, which is why he rationalized building his home so big, throughout the year. Apparently the biggest and best honor you could have as one of these nobles in his royal court was like helping him put his shirts on in the morning. He had nobles that served him his food. He had nobles that helped him decide his outfit for the day. He had nobles that drove his carriage for him, that did all this stuff for him, right? Louis XIV is basically one of the biggest narcissists on the planet, right? Now, he also heavily persecuted Huguenots. He demanded religious unity. He wanted to go back to full-on Catholicism, so he's going to revoke the Edict of Nantes and kick the Huguenot persecution right back up again. He actually was so bad about his persecution that was when a lot of the Huguenots actually left and colonized parts of Canada and actually went to the New World. Y'all should remember that from US 1, right? The Huguenots actually were one of the big settlers for the French. Also, he had the Palace of Versailles built, right? So to give you an understanding what the Palace of Versailles looks like, I pulled up one of my older presentations right here just to give you an idea. So this is the Palace of Versailles, right? Just to give you one quick little insight, Versailles, not in Paris. It is actually 60 miles outside of Paris, right? So this is the building itself, and it's right wing all the way over here, and this is where the king's bedroom is. And then all the way over here, about a quarter of a mile away, is the queen's bedroom over on the other side. And as you can see, the grounds are massive. These water fountains are about as big as a football field, right? Just the two of them, not including these massively gorgeous trimmed greenery areas. This right here is the gate of which you got into Versailles with. He had his face made of gold put on the side areas right here so he could make sure everyone knew that you were arriving to the Sun King's home, right? Made of solid gold. Well, not solid. It would be destroyed if it was made of solid gold because it's so soft. But made like of gold plating on the outside, right? And this, of course, is his insignia that I was just talking about, his Sun King look, right? This is the entranceway. Whenever you wanted to come to one of his get-togethers, which this place could apparently also allow the public, it was open to the public and the public were allowed to go, there were as many as 10,000 people at Versailles every single day. And I don't mean modern day. I mean every single day in the 1700s. In like 1701, 10,000 people. Like his parties would regularly have thousands of people in one room. He called it his Hall of Mirrors, right? This is his bedroom. As you can see, the big draping of tapestries, the four-poster bed. The reason why four-poster beds exist is so he could actually hook up with people, and while the maids were coming in and out and stuff like that, that's where they actually come from. This is not a joke. This is just what it is. I'm sorry, parents, if that makes you upset, but it's just true. Anyway. And the other big one, this is the queen's bedroom, right? A quarter of a mile away. So she's got some nice digs, too. Oh, apparently about 4 grown people can fit inside of these beds at one time. They're that big. This is his Hall of Mirrors, right? Where he would actually have all of his get-togethers and his parties. And in a house that had over 300 rooms in it and over 70 different bedrooms, there's not a single bathroom in it, right? So he actually, funny enough, he had to make a royal decree for the Hall of Mirrors and the Versailles to have all of the human waste dumped out of it every Tuesday. And that included human waste that may have gotten on the floor, because at his parties, people would literally just go to the bathroom, like, on the floor. Absolutism in Europe, not that enlightened, right? And then these are the backgrounds area. I know this looks like something out of a miniature, but it's actually legitimate. These are like the backgrounds, and this is a pavilion overlooking his from that you exit out of his bedroom into. It's like his own private balcony. So yeah, as you can see, the Palace of Versailles is absolutely massive, massive. And then he had it built, and he actually used French tax money to pay for the entire thing. So let's keep on going though. Another big thing about him. He's going to hire this guy, Jean-Baptiste Colbert, as his financial advisor, who is going to apply these things called mercantilistic policies, right? Mercantilism is a word that we've used in the past in like your freshman year. You probably used it in US 1, things like that. Mercantilism is basically just the idea. It's a system of economic regulations that tries to make as much money for a national government as they possibly can, right? And this is basically just to increase your power in the world. One big thing about it, write this down next to world right here, an example of this is exporting more than you import, right? So you're exporting more refined goods from your colonies for sale, and you're importing less. If you're importing, usually that incurs transitional fees and taxes and actually cost to bring something in, right? It also means usually that you're buying something. So you want to be selling more than you're buying, and also the idea that you just literally want to have more gold and silver than the next guy closest to you, right? So mercantilism is literally all about having the most money you possibly ever could as a national government. This is a big trait of absolutist governments, is the idea of mercantilism, right? So, keep going though. Wars. He's going to fight a series of wars as well. He loved being called the conqueror, right? He loved the reputation of the idea that he would conquer anyone and everyone. So much so that he was at war 33 out of the 54 years of his reign, okay? So, France is going to get huge after his reign as well. He created a professional army that came along with standards. So as we know, the Spider King, Louis VIII, right, he actually created the first professional army in France, and army sizes are going to be tripling around this time. But he also created the first professional armies that had standards. Standard uniforms, standard guns, standard rations, which included a half a cup of liquor every day, which I thought was really interesting. Standard medical care, standard everything. It makes the job seem more enticing, all right? So next thing is, his model was imitated all over Europe. The idea of professional armies with uniforms, guns, rations, and an equitable expanse across the board is going to make so much sense because it's so much more effective, right? Because the armies that were raised by nobles, it all depended on how much the noble wanted to pay the next soldier. So you could be a part of the Kozlowski family nobility army and get paid nothing and barely get fed bread on a regular basis, or you could be a part of like the McHugh family army, which got fed very well and wore very nice uniforms and was given nice guns, right? Because Shannon's the greatest. So it's one of those kind of things, right? Now, also though, this is going to be imitated, like I said, but the biggest war out of all of them was called the War of Spanish Succession, right? And that happened in 1701 to 1713, okay? The biggest war, of course, was the War of Spanish Succession, and it was when, I'm going to raise it up again a little bit, there you go. King of Spain, Charles II was his name. You don't need to necessarily know that, but Charles II is going to die childless, right? So the big thing about this time period, of course, is Spain is falling hard. We're going to talk about that in the next slide in about 2 seconds. They're dying quickly, right? So a lot of their possessions and a lot of their land and a lot of their assets are up for grabs by a lot of these different European powers, right? So rule is going to pass to Louis's grandson, Philip V. Okay, put a 5 next to that. The thing about it is, though, is when Charles died, he left a will bequeathing some of the estates and some of the, bequeath means to leave, leaving a lot of the states and the establishments and the nobility in different provinces and colonies to France, because that was actually his father-in-law, right? So they're very closely tied together, as you know, like all these royals were at the time, because they were all hooking up with their cousins and stuff like that. Ugh. So anyway, massive war is going to break out when Louis tries to claim these colonies, these goods, and these territories from Spain. And then Spain is going to end up trying to buck back, but the problem is that France had just led all these other wars beforehand and expanded their borders and gotten much larger and took up all these little colonies and stuff and sent all these people to Canada. They were making moves, right? Making moves to be a very strong, powerful nation state inside of Europe. But the other thing about it is like Spain can't really fight back right now. And so England, the Dutch, the Austrians, and the Prussians are going to unite and form a grand alliance against him, and France is eventually going to lose this war. Now, what's to be learned about this? Some of you are like, well, who cares? It's not a big deal. I mean, so he lost, whatever. Well, the thing about it is that the Peace of Utrecht, like the Union of Utrecht, right, in the Netherlands, in like a neutral area, unofficially basically set the limits on expansion of European powers, right? So the big thing about it is, France is going to, like, it was a lot like George Washington when he stepped down after 2 terms, which unofficially precedented the idea that a president only serves 2 terms. This war basically set the precedent that if one European power begins to try and grow and conquer and move and expand to a ridiculous rate, it is the obligation of the other powers in Europe as well as those abroad, sounds a lot like World War II, doesn't it, to set that limit, set that line, to unite together and push them back, right? To put them in their place, to keep everyone happy, right? Nobody wants a fascist state that rules over 1,000 different people with 1,000 different languages, 1,000 different situations. Nobody wants that, right? A lot like what happened to Hitler. He was growing so powerful, so very fast, annexing different areas. The Allies united together to try and stop him. But it wasn't until America came in to actually really get the job done. But due to this, France is going to lose territory in North America, Canada, which is actually the same thing, and I apologize about that. I'd just write North America, and Gibraltar, which is this little port off the edge of Spain, and all that's going to go to England, right? And rule of Spain, though, is going to pass to Philip V, his grandson, to try and secede everything down. Because basically, in the long run, we all know what Louis was up to. He was trying to control France. He really would have, like, usurped them into his empire if he could have, right? Poor Spain. Because here's the thing about Spain. They're so dumb weak by that point. Oh, sweet irony, right? So, because here's the thing about it. Some of you are like, why did he write that? Well, you know, like, oh, sweet irony kind of defines the situation of Spain. Because at the time of the beginning of the 17th century, in the early 1600s, the shoe was on the other foot. France was piddly and couldn't get anything together. And Spain was the dominant powerhouse of Europe with all of their North American goods and their processing and, like, the firms that were located there and the massive amounts of gold and mercantilism that was happening in Spain. But the problem is that 60% of this is going to go downhill due to English and Dutch influence. A lot of people are going to start buying from the English and Dutch because the Dutch have the spice trade and the English goods are much cheaper. Because the thing about it is and France's sugarcane industry was blowing up. So what did you really need to buy from Spain anymore? England had the tobacco, France had the sugar, Dutch had the spices. What were you buying from Spain? Nothing. You weren't buying anything except for some possible farm products for them. Now, natives were also dying from the encomienda system, which was their main system of labor, because that's all they could afford, and then disease, and then mines are going to begin to run dry. Mines run out. We know that they don't replenish themselves. It's not like fossil fuels, right? Royal debt is going to be sky high, and their money is going to devalue because they're repeatedly trying to devalue their money to repay debts. Basically, what they were doing is oh, well, you know how a Spanish crown was worth 1? Well, now it's worth 2! And then this is going to get out of control, and it's going to cause massive inflation. Also, due to the way too much Spanish silver and gold in the area. Spanish also class condemns hard work and degrades the middle class. The Spanish royalty and the nobles weren't actually making money. They were sending people to churches, and they weren't actually gaining any funds out of it. Also, rents skyrocketing. The Jews and the Muslims were expelled, which were some of the biggest craft workers in the area. No money for the military. Spain lost war after war, and by 1688, their power in Europe was virtually gone. Portugal has annexed away from them, right? They have become their own nation state. They're losing turf to France in northern areas of Catalonia, places like that. So the main thing to divulge from this is Spain was the powerhouse in the 1600s, and by 1688, 88 years later, boom! Sweet irony, the shoe was flipped on the other foot. Too much gold and silver, too many natives dying off, too much, no, we don't want to work hard, no cultural diversity, no Jews, no Muslims, no one's making any products, right? So, boom! That's the end of this whole bad boy. Thank y'all so much for viewing. I'll see y'all tomorrow at Camden Catholic. We'll go over a little bit of stuff, but we might just play a game, just to review a little bit. But I'll see you guys then, okay?